Hi guys, this is Fernando doing another video for More Survivalists, in this case talking about shelter. And I'll start with a little story of mine. A few weeks ago my folks were visiting. We went for a walk in this park with my wife, my two kids and my folks. All of a sudden it starts raining pretty bad, which is something that occurs with certain frequency. These showers catching you by surprise here because of the weather. So we took shelter under some trees, and cars were pretty nearby. But I remember that I had in my pack, in my EDC pack, I had something. So I started pulling 1, 2, 3 emergency ponchos, and a couple of these emergency blankets. And between these, we all managed to get back to our vehicles without getting soaked by this rain. And no big deal or anything. We were really just close by, and it was hardly, barely uncomfortable if you hadn't gotten wet. But it was still interesting to see my folks' face, because all of a sudden, even my wife, she looks at me and how many of those things do you have in there? What normal person has 3 different rain ponchos and a couple emergency blankets in their bag? Who carries that on a regular basis? Well, I do. So that would be me. That's basically what it is. And why is that? And I'm sure some of you guys you're nodding and saying, yeah, it happens to me as well. When you pull from your everyday carry bag, you pull something that's very convenient in that moment, and people look at you as, well, that's great, but how did you know that we would be needing that? Well, you don't know that. You just prepare for some of the more likely scenarios, and if you go about it in a logical way, you always cover some of the more important things first, right? We've talked about the laws of 3 before, that basically said that you cannot survive 3 minutes without air. So air is kind of important. That's why we covered up in one of the previous videos, having a respirator or face mask and that sort of thing. Why is it important to at least have something, even if it's not the best thing you could possibly have? Maybe having one respirator, collapsible respirator, might be a good thing. I was watching today on TV, on the news, there was this demolition in France. The building went down, and apparently no one figured that after a building gets blown up, a huge cloud of dust goes your way. So everyone was coughing, and I was thinking, yeah, that would be a good example of when you would be needing something like that, carrying it on a regular basis. And it's just the principle of the thing, of being prepared. Continuing with the laws of 3, they also say that you cannot survive 3 hours of exposure to extreme weather conditions, and that's where shelter comes into place. Now, of course, a great tent would be better. Very nice, fancy sleeping bag would be better than any of these improvised things. But we go back to the topic of not being able to cover that, take that with you at all times. But something like this, absolutely, you can have something like this with you at all times if you have a normal size backpack or bag of some sort. It's not that big a deal. It's pretty compact stuff. Especially these things, the ponchos are like nothing. And once you press it a little bit, it just disappears there for you. So that's basically the idea. When you're a father like I am, that you have a wife and kids usually with you as well, it's not just about you. So that's why I had a couple spares. I had a couple spares just in case I needed that. Right now, talking specifically about what's being out there and your options. The emergency ponchos, they're nothing fancy about them. They're very typical, normal stuff. And basically the idea is just to keep you dry. And keeping you dry is kind of a big deal in the location where I am now, where it rains a lot. So it is not a light issue. You have to have that taken into account. Maybe someone in a more extreme location, maybe this is not going to be enough. Or at least you can have at least more of them, right? If you have more of this stuff, the more you have, the more layers you will be able to put onto you, and that improves your odds considerably, right? So on one side we have these emergency ponchos, which are great, which I believe are a part of your everyday carry kit in most places. Maybe you live in a place where it never rains, or extremely rarely happens. That may not be your situation, or very hot weather. combined with lack of rain, maybe you don't need something like this, but still there's the possibility of you needing to improvise a shelter from extreme sunlight, if that's a problem. Now on the side of emergency blankets, guys, these are emergency blankets, survival blankets, space blankets, some of the names which you will be finding it. It's one of the most common things, and anyone that's into survival and preparedness for any sort of time knows about these things, right? These are pretty handy. These are like the basic stuff you get when you get into all this stuff. It is, according to the marketing, it's supposed to project 90% of the heat back to you. So yeah, well, that sounds pretty nice. Now, how realistic is that? This is very thin. I'm not so sure that you're gonna be getting 90% of your heat back, especially when you think about it in terms of points when you're sitting, when you're in contact in the ground, and in direct contact with the floor, with the hard floor. That's basically creating a point where heat leaks from you very fast. So as to make this better, you would need some knowledge on how to prepare a proper shelter, and without getting much into that, because of course that's not the point here. You basically need, in extreme weather conditions, you need to insulate yourself from the floor, which is when you're sitting, when you're lying on the floor. That's the point where you lose most of your body heat, and this isn't gonna be doing anything for you because it's so thin. You need a cushion of some sort. So pine needles, leaves, dry leaves, make a bigger as possible of a cushion so as to avoid that. Try not to get sidetracked. You have them in other colors, such as this one, and it's not just about a blanket. It's not just about wrapping it around you so as to preserve heat, which is the most common use, of course, or using it over your head as well, so as to avoid getting rain like we did. You can also use it for a number of other things. It's from a purely strategic survival point of view, a membrane that it's waterproof and as thin as this and as wide as this. It's something I say impossible to improvise in nature. So it's like, like good cordage, like a good paracord. It's the kind of thing that if you have it during an emergency, it's great because it's very hard to improvise. You could use it also for rolling some of your kit, your supplies, and using to improvise a backpack, especially if you have a little bit of cordage. You can use it for, even if it's big enough, you can make lots of things. I mean, you can do a tarp so as to cover you from rain. That's why I'm saying if you have two of these, maybe you use one to make a tarp and cover yourself from the rain, and using the other one to wrap around it. And the more you have, the better. I've seen it used for after digging a hole and using this so as to as a layer, using it for storing water. You can even make flotation devices of some sort. All possibilities. Anything that a thin waterproof layer like this would be useful. That's basically the idea. There's also variations. This is basically like the mylar material, right? There's also variations. You will have some that's in sleeping bag format, same material, just like a sleeping bag, so as to crawl into. You also have things like these, which are like emergency tent of the same material. Pretty neat. You have a little bit of cordage. This I got in one of these pound stores or dollar stores, something like that, very cheap, but still useful. Now the warning here is this is very, very fragile, right? This is going to be breaking. Anything that punctures through it will tear it open very fast. So it's kind of disposable, and not only that, it's very fragile, so you have to use it with care. If not, it's going to be ripping and breaking on you pretty fast. These ones would be used for improvised shelter. Sleeping in these things, unless you really have to, they're noisy, they're fragile. Any movement at all, wind will make it extremely loud, and it's not gonna be nice, so to speak. But it is, of course, much better than not having anything at all. So maybe keeping one of these in your vehicle. And again, it's important to understand your personal circumstances. If the kind of weather you have is very extreme, then of course it's not going to be cutting it. Even, you know, your car breaks down, you have a real emergency, and you have 20 below zero, 20 centigrades below zero, you're going to be dying in some of these. It's just going to be making it easier for a rescue team to pick up your corpse, you know, nicely wrapped like a candy bar or something like that. But if temperatures aren't that extreme, then this will do. And again, the more you have, the better. If you combine something like this with a good proper jacket, a couple of these wrapping you around, and this, and you combine this with a properly built shelter, then you have something going on for you there, right? That's basically the idea. Something else, this is one of an emergency blanket as well, proper made emergency blanket. This I had with me since I'm 15 years old. I've carried this with me many times, many places, always kept it in case I just needed it. It is some of the same concept. It is very nice because it's of course much more sturdier than these basically disposable ones. This has a thicker material, by all means, has the two colors, so it's at least 2 layers here. Much more rugged, much more resistant because of the construction, so it's stitched all over here. You also saw it has those loops here for doing proper shelter with it. This is good stuff, right? It's getting quite a bit more bulky, as you can appreciate. For the size of this, you can have like I don't know, what is it, 6, 7, 8 of these others, right? So maybe this is too much for your everyday carry pack. This is actually what I keep in my vehicle, right? Part of my car kit. Okay, not that great for everyday carry because it's quite bulky, but for a vehicle, yeah, it does work. Okay. One final thing that I think it's interesting: these protective plastic decoration sheets, right? Just a plastic sheath, big plastic sheath. Not very resistant either, but it is big enough so as to improvise a shelter, especially in places like these where it does rain a lot. And yeah, again, nothing, 99p of a pound, you know, less than a pound. You can use this. Sometimes I take these. Well, actually, I take these every time I go any place outdoors where there's the possibility of rain starting and needing to improvise some sort of shelter. This is the kind of thing that may save the day in terms of, you know, you're there backpacking, you're having a good time, and it starts raining. Your chances are either heading back, probably getting all wet, or doing something about it. With this sheath, you know, again, normal stuff in any hardware store, 3 meters by 4 meters. This is big enough so as to, with a little bit of cordage, improvise a nice tarp, giving you an area that is protected from rain. So you may be able to take a rest, maybe even have lunch, not getting soaked wet while doing so. Maybe wait until it stops raining and keep having fun. Gives you options, and it's material that's used for improvising shelters rather nicely. Okay, so I'm going to be doing another video showing you what I'm carrying these days in my EDC pack. And one of the things that, you know, one of the criticisms that I received a few years ago, actually, was quite a bit, quite a long time ago. Someone said, "I don't trust you because you change your gear and you change what you carry all the time." Well, that's basically the idea. If you don't learn what's out there, if you don't adapt to the different circumstances, to your, especially something like what I've done, which is changing your location. A new location has another whole set of rules that are different, and a change of lifestyle has that as well, right? When I left Argentina, I stopped living in one of the largest cities in the planet, and now I'm in a place where I have the option, because it's safe, I have the option of doing some of the things that I love doing, such as going out for walks, going hiking and such. I have the possibility of doing that. So my lifestyle has changed, as has my location. So of course I change. And same thing with gear. Flashlights, LED technology changing every couple months. How could you not change what you're carrying and not recognize the different things that are out there? Some quite much better than what you probably had not that long ago. So folks, basically a little introduction to the topic of shelter, how to improvise that, right? At least having, you know, for me, for a single guy, that's just him, maybe a couple of these, right? A couple emergency blankets and maybe one of these emergency ponchos. If something happens, you will be able to improvise something quite nicely if conditions aren't that extreme. Guys, take care, consider subscribing if you're liking these videos, and see you next time. Have a good day.